The history of the iPad. Computer literacy is a contact with the activity of computing deep enough to make the computational equivalent of reading and writing fluid and enjoyable. As in all the arts, a romance with the material must be well underway. If we value the lifelong learning of arts and letters as a springboard for personal and societal growth, should any less effort be spent to make computing a part of our lives? Computer engineer and inventor Alan Kay in 1984. Many would say that the iPad is the most romantic, fluid, and enjoyable of personal computing devices. When entering a room, an iPad becomes the object of stares, the starter of conversations, the most elegant of accessories. What is it about the iPad that causes such a strong reaction? How do we understand how to catch the technology tiger by the tail in education to make the best use of this powerful tool? To answer these questions, it's helpful to investigate the nature of the process of its invention. The story of the iPad is the story of creativity, a vision for something new, incremental change over a period of time, and a tremendous investment of resources to solve problems. The result? Some of the most unique and powerful innovations in recent history, and a remarkable tool for use in the classroom, particularly helpful for facilitating students' creative thinking. David Pogue, New York Times technology columnist, on the day the iPad was introduced on January 28, 2010, said this: "Like the iPhone, the iPad is really a vessel, a tool, a 1.5-pound sack of potential. It may become many things. It may change an industry or two, or it may not. It may introduce a new category, something between a phone and a laptop, or it may not. And anyone who claims to know what will happen will wind up looking like a fool." The iPad is a thin, flat computer with an integrated touch screen. It weighs roughly 1.5 pounds and is half an inch thick. Apple says that the iPad, quote, "isn't just the best device of its kind, it's a whole new kind of device," end quote. With a backlit LED screen, the iPad makes graphic images particularly vivid. Colors are brighter. Children look happier. The digital birds sing more sweetly. The story of the iPad is primarily the story of Steve Jobs, the CEO and co-founder of Apple. In 1971, Steve Jobs, age 16, met Steve Wozniak, age 22, and the two became friends. The younger Steve convinced the older Steve to help him assemble a computer and sell it. The result was an order from a local computer store, the Byte Shop, for 50 machines at $500 each on delivery. To get parts to build the machines, Jobs approached a manufacturer with the purchase order from the Byte Shop. The manufacturer called the owner of the store to be sure the purchase order was legitimate. Impressed with their commitment to hard work, the parts were issued on credit. Jobs, Wozniak, and their small crew worked tirelessly building and testing the computers that were delivered to the Byte Shop. The profits financed the beginning of a billion-dollar company without selling any stock or diluting ownership. Gifted children are often entrepreneurial. Over the years, Jobs has had both monumental successes and abysmal failures. Initially, the early Apple II computer was a success, but later Macintosh models were lackluster, leading to Jobs being ousted by Apple's board in 1985. During those, quote, "years in the wilderness," end quote, as some have called it, he built skills that enabled him to cast a vision that would change the world of mobile computing, and some would say the world itself. His experiences during the years away from Apple led to the further understanding that keeping talented designers is as important as attracting talent to begin with. Apple has one of the most stable senior management teams in the computer industry, which allows trust to be developed over time, an important aspect enabling creativity to flourish. Jobs came to understand that the computers of the future wouldn't look like the computers of the past. This allowed him to break out of conventional models and envision the iPod, the iPhone, and eventually the iPad. Kevin Compton, a senior executive at Businessland, said that the years away from Apple taught Mr. Jobs, quote, "not to try to do everything himself," end quote. Others disagree because Jobs is well known for being intimately involved with the design process. But the hard work of large design teams allowed Jobs to focus on the big picture, as others grunted through the day-to-day engineering tasks that enabled his vision to be fulfilled. Leveraging the creativity of others and working as an effective team leader enabled Jobs to see his vision realized. Quoted in the New York Times, David B. Yaffe, a professor at Harvard Business School, said, quote, "Real innovation in technology involves a leap ahead, anticipating needs that no one really knew they had, and then delivering capabilities that redefine product categories. That's what Steve Jobs has done," end quote. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. Alan Kay. The idea of the tablet PC is not new. In 1972, a research paper published by the former Xerox PARC scientist and technology guru Alan Kay called, quote, "A Personal Computer for Children of All Ages," end quote, references the Dynabook, a description of a vision of what personal computing could be. Kay refers to a device with a, quote, "plasma screen with a contrast ratio approaching that of a book, a keyboard with no moving parts, a network connection with the ability to purchase, transfer, and download files, global information connectivity, and a price of $500, end quote. 38 years later, the iPad is eerily similar to Kay's description. When recently interviewed by technology blogger Wolfgang Gruner, Alan Kay indicated that Steve Jobs knew about the Dynabook and a later model called the PARC Alto for many decades, and says it's hard to imagine that it didn't influence Jobs. The relationship between Alan Kay and Steve Jobs goes deeper and includes a fascinating event that connects the iPhone and iPad. When Steve showed me the iPhone and its introduction a few years ago and asked me if it was good enough to criticize, which is what I had said about the Mac in 1984, I held up my moleskin notebook and said, "Make the screen at least 5 inches by 8 inches and you'll rule the world," Kay said. The screen of the iPad is approximately 7 by 9. As a company, Apple has been called a creativity factory, but it's well understood that it's Mr. Jobs' vision and personal aesthetic that drives the spare, stylish look of Apple products and avoids featureitis, the tendency of engineers to cram everything that enters their mind into a device. This is true of the retro Apple products like the early Macintosh computers that cost $9,000. Some of the most innovative and cheaper recent advances include the iPhone, iPod, and iPod Touch. In 2000, Apple saw the need for a less clunky device to play music. The iPod was developed by a team at Apple's headquarters in Cupertino, California. To say that Steve Jobs was involved in the process is an understatement. Developers say that the reason the iPod is louder than rivals is because Jobs is partially deaf and prodded engineers to crank up the sound. At a cost of $400, it was sharply criticized as too expensive, but confounded the critics by exceeding all sales expectations. The iPod Touch, which pioneered touchscreen controls, was released on September 5, 2007. On January 9, 2007, the iPhone was released to much fanfare. With a multi-touch interface, phone, and personal digital assistant, it allows users to access phone operations by touching the screen with their fingers. Apps, were popularized and include everything from assistance with directions to dining reviews. Hugely popular, by January 5, 2010, more than 3 billion have been downloaded. The iPad functions similarly to an iPhone and iPad Touch. The primary difference is the screen size, which allows the iPad to be used more easily in the classroom as well as the boardroom. Early models do not have a camera, though the next generation with a camera is scheduled to be released in April. Innovation keeps coming. Apple has announced a new operating system scheduled to roll out in the summer of 2011 called OS X Lion. True to form, Apple's not announced how much it will cost or other details. Response to the iPad from critics has been interesting. It seems that the iPad is a device that techies despise and the rest of the world loves. There are drawbacks. There's no camera, it's difficult to multitask, and there's no HDMI port. It would be nice if there was a flash drive port to make it easier to share data. Initially, reviewers ranging from the Los Angeles Times to Gizmodo were underwhelmed. Personal experience, however, is different. Kids love this thing. Their ears perk up when the iPads come out. They feel that something magical is going to happen in the classroom. Teachers spend the few minutes of hubbub before faculty meetings comparing apps. Something huge is happening here. It relates to a magic that Alan November writes about in his post, Students as Contributors, The Digital Learning Farm, on his website, novemberlearning.com. Quote, students from Lincoln Middle School in Santa Monica, California have energized their school through the use of screencasted tutorials. Started through the leadership of their teacher, Eric Marcos, these kids have begun documenting their learning by recording themselves solving problems based on material discussed in class. That's one of the most exciting possibilities for the iPad, a way to extend student learning by using screencasting as a way to make learning more authentic. It makes the project described by Alan November more user-friendly and allows for more creativity by the students. How this will work depends in large part on the motivation of both the teacher and the students, but the possibilities are tremendous. Unfortunately, continuing education for teachers provided by Apple is very expensive. In some schools, there's money to purchase the technology, but not the training. If Apple can't or won't make it cheaper, there's opportunity for enterprising educators to become experts and to facilitate professional development as this technology becomes more prevalent in the education community. Apple should leverage teachers by developing a network of facilitators that are provided with state-of-the-art equipment and support in exchange for helping other teachers learn to use the iPad. Part of the creative piece of this technology is the necessity for those who aren't, quote, digital natives, end quote, to be willing to try it out, to make a mistake, to get it wrong, to know that the kids will have more answers than the teacher and that it's okay. The process of creativity involved in screencasting and other uses of iPad technology, like blogging a field trip or Skyping with a child at home with mono, is reminiscent of how technology itself was developed. An opportunity envisioned, a vision cast, a group coming together to produce something that meets a need. Holding tight to the technology tiger's tail as she provides a delightful and educational ride.